She was dismissed as just tagging along. But when 30 Marines walked into a Taliban death trap, Staff Sergeant Rhea Morgan proved everyone wrong. Armed with a Barrett rifle, a calm trigger finger, and the kind of instincts command never wanted to hear. They said I was just tagging along. The girl with the big rifle and bigger opinions. Something to fill out the roster, window dressing with a trigger. But now Colonel Mason Holbrook had binoculars pressed to his face, his knuckles white against the chill air of Cunar's upper ridge lines. He was watching me, Staff Sergeant Rhea Morgan, while 30 Marines pushed straight into a Taliban death funnel 1,300 meters below. For months, he'd ignored my briefings, dismissed my reports, laughed off my positioning charts like I was just playing pretend in the boys' war. But I wasn't here to be liked. I was here because I knew how to make the enemy disappear. And today, Holbrook was going to learn that the deadliest Marine in his command wasn't the guy who yelled loudest in the planning tent. She was the one already settled into a sniper's nest above him, cloaked in dust and silence, finger on the trigger of a Barrett MRAD chambered in. 338 Lapua. No backup, no spotlight. Just me. And the truth they refused to see. They call this old Bill's tales, right? So if you're hearing this from a porch in Iowa or a truck cab somewhere off I-10, let me tell you a story the brass never put in their reports. Because sometimes, the only thing between a clean op and a slaughter is one ignored voice on the ridge. I'd been up there since 0430, lying belly flat against fractured shale, wrapped in a ghillie suit made from dried brush and Afghan dust. To the naked eye, I was just part of the rocks. But through my spotting scope, the valley below was alive with movement. The kind I'd warned them about. For 48 hours I tracked those patterns. Fighters slipping into the northeast culvert. Weapon crates being dragged through the old irrigation trench. RPGs, belt-fed PCAMs, the works. I logged it all. I flagged it 3 times in briefings. No one listened. Holbrook had tapped Staff Sergeant Jace Connolly to run Overwatch on the western slope. Solid Marine. Good eye out to 800 meters. But those Taliban nests I'd marked were well past his range. And his position had no angle on the dry riverbed. That was my sector. And I was going to hold it whether the colonel liked it or not. The air up there was thin, sharp. Every breath carried the cold of 7,000 feet. But I didn't feel it. My whole body had melted into the terrain. I'd learned that trick from my grandfather, Harold Morgan, Montana cattleman turned Vietnam sniper. He taught me patience, scope work, and how to shoot through wind the way others walk through doors. He also taught me this. You don't argue with people who think you don't belong. You let your rifle do the talking. I was 28 now. Been deployed 4 times. Had 31 confirmed. 2 unconfirmed. One they said was improbable because no one believed I could thread a shot through 3 moving trucks at 1,600 meters. Let them doubt. It just meant they never saw the bodies I dropped. Below me, Bravo platoon was fanning out into a narrow choke point. The exact one I had highlighted the night before. If they hit that bend and the enemy was dug in like I suspected, they'd be caught between rock walls and overlapping machine gun fire. I adjusted my position, shifting weight to my elbow, brushing away a pebble that might throw off my aim. The Barrett was locked in. Turrets adjusted. Range dialed to 1,420 meters. Wind was steady, northwest at 5 knots. Humidity low. Air density perfect for clean travel. And that's when it started. Flashes in the valley. PCAMs lighting up from the ridgeline opposite Bravo. Screams over the radio. Contact, contact, left flank. Taking heavy fire. I didn't wait for orders. Orders had gotten people killed before. I fired. 1 round. A gunner dropped. Then a second, pivoting with disbelief before the 338 tore through his chest. The ridge exploded in chaos. Taliban fighters scrambled. I stayed on the scope, calm, counting heartbeats between shots. My name's Rhea Morgan. I was never supposed to be the lead sniper. Never supposed to make the calls. But that morning, from a rock nobody cared about, I saved 30 lives before anyone remembered I existed. And that was just the beginning. Who the hell's firing? Someone barked over the comms. They knew. They just didn't want to believe it. I stayed quiet. The Barrett's recoil settled into my shoulder like an old friend. I worked the bolt, chambered another round, and shifted slightly to reacquire. Second team of fighters was pivoting from the tree line, trying to flank left. Bad move. Another shot. Clean. The man with the RPG collapsed mid-step, weapon rolling useless into the dust. Radio calls grew frantic. Secondary Overwatch. Come in. Who's engaging? Repeat. Identify yourself. I didn't answer. I wasn't interested in credit. Only results. Captain Jenna Marlowe, Bravo CO, finally broke through the chatter. Overwatch 2. Your fire is saving lives. Keep hitting targets of opportunity. Priority on RPGs and PKMs. That was all I needed. I dropped into rhythm. Spot, adjust, fire. One after another, methodical and detached, like threading a needle from a mile away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't proving a point. I was doing my job, the job they'd trained me for, and then tried to sideline. The enemy formation unraveled within minutes. Their ambush had hinged on surprise, and I'd taken that from them in under 60 seconds. Without suppressive fire, their advance collapsed. Bravo started moving again, bounding through cover, pushing through with tighter formations. I heard Connolly on the radio from the West Ridge, breathing hard. Whoever's laying that fire, that's surgical. It's not me. I don't have that angle. Someone in command finally said what they all knew. Morgan. That's Morgan. Yeah, took them long enough. In 22 minutes, I fired 17 rounds. 15 confirmed impacts. The other 2 were suppression shots to pin movement. When the valley fell quiet, all you could hear was the crackle of radios and the heavy breath of Marines who realized they were still alive. I exhaled, my cheek still pressed to the stock. The barrel steamed faintly in the mountain air. Down below, the team was regrouping, patching wounds, sweeping for stragglers. But up here, I was alone with the silence that always followed violence. And that's when my radio finally chirped with a voice I hadn't expected. Overwatch 2, this is Colonel Holbrook. Report to forward CP. Now. No good shooting. No thank you. Just that dry, clipped tone of a man who had been proven wrong in front of his entire command. I packed up in silence. Didn't say a word to the mountain or the ghosts that lived on it. The climb down took 35 minutes. Not because I was tired, but because I needed to cool my pulse before I walked into that command tent. It wasn't just the weight of the Barrett across my back. It was knowing that everything had changed, and none of it by permission. When I reached the perimeter, the junior Marine at the checkpoint stepped aside without a word. His eyes locked on mine. He didn't salute, but he didn't need to. The look said enough. Inside the forward CP, the radio still buzzed with post-op cleanup. Sand-covered tablets lay scattered across the table, maps still pinned down by rocks, and half-drunk coffee mugs. The tent's canvas flapped lightly in the morning breeze. Colonel Holbrook stood at the center, his posture military perfect, except for the crease in his brow. Next to him, Captain Marlowe had her arms folded across her chest. Staff Sergeant Connolly lingered near the back, jaw tight. As I stepped inside, Holbrook turned to face me. Staff Sergeant Morgan, he said. Sir, you directly violated standing orders. You fired without clearance. You disobeyed an operational structure put in place for a reason. I didn't flinch. And in doing so, he continued, voice low, you saved an entire platoon. The silence that followed hit like a rifle crack. Holbrook exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Sitrep says you eliminated 15 targets. Confirmed. No civilian casualties. No friendly fire. No deviation from threat priority. He finally looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I didn't see a man trying to dismiss me. I saw a commander reckoning with his mistake. You were right. Your recon was right. Your call was right. Captain Marlowe stepped forward. Colonel, if I may, her engagement saved my squad. We walked right into a textbook kill zone. The only reason we're standing here is because Staff Sergeant Morgan made the call when nobody else would. Connolly shifted uncomfortably, then took a breath. I owe you one, Morgan, he said, not quite looking at me. You called it before we ever left the wire. I should have backed you in that briefing. I didn't. I nodded once. That was enough. Holbrook cleared his throat. Effective immediately, you'll be reassigned as lead Overwatch on all forward ops. You'll report directly to me for tactical assessments. I won't ignore your input again. I wanted to feel vindicated. Wanted to feel proud. But I didn't. Because pride doesn't matter when you're counting the lives you almost couldn't save. Back at COP Vance, the dust hadn't even settled when the platoon rolled in. No victory chants. No high fives. Just tired boots stepping off the convoy, Dirt streaked across faces that had been inches from death. I stayed off to the side, leaning against the sandbag wall by the supply tent, arms crossed. I didn't expect anything. No parade. No medals. I hadn't done it for them. But they came anyway. Sergeant Theo Grant was the first. 24, squad leader, took a round through the shoulder plate. He stepped out of the MRAP, eyes scanning the yard until they landed on me. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked up, took a slow breath, and held out his hand. I took it. Your fire pinned them before we even knew we were under. I saw the muzzle flashes dropping, one by one. You were the only thing between us and a funeral. I nodded. Glad you made it, Sergeant. Behind him came Corporal Liam Cho, 19. The kid who always wore his helmet a little crooked and carried photos of his twin brothers back home. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in one day. I saw you, he said quietly. Through the binos. Just a shimmer up on the ridge. I thought it was a ghost. I smiled faintly. Sometimes I feel like one. Then came the rest. Private Jaden Brooks, Sergeant Riley, even Doc Mateo with his bloodied gloves still hanging from his belt. One by one they passed me, and every single one did the same thing. They made eye contact. Not because of rank, but because of what we all now shared. The quiet understanding between those who lived because someone else refused to be silent. Captain Marlowe watched from across the yard, arms folded. She didn't interrupt, just gave me a nod. The kind that says, you earned something no briefing room could ever give you. Later that night, when the fire pit was lit and the laughter slowly crept back into the base, I stayed back. I sat on my cot, cleaning my rifle. Not because it needed it, because I did. Next to me was my notebook. Inside, I kept their faces. The Marines I'd lost. The ones I'd saved. Not statistics. People. And every time I made a decision out there, I flipped to that page first. Let the generals write their citations. Let the politics grind on. I just needed to know they came home. That was enough. The next morning, I was called into the ops tent before dawn. Same battered structure. Same coffee-stained maps. But this time, something was different. My seat was no longer in the back corner. Colonel Holbrook gestured to a spot beside Captain Marlowe. Staff Sergeant Morgan, you'll assist in mapping Overwatch placement for Operation Railhook. I stepped forward, slow and measured. Around the table sat half a dozen officers. The same ones who had barely glanced at me just days earlier. Now they waited for my word. I laid down my notes, reached for a dry erase marker, drew out the northeast ridge lines and crosswind patterns I'd been tracking since before the last mission. My voice didn't waver. The kill box at Sector Delta 9 is a mirage. Too obvious. Taliban will have backup lines here. I tapped the elevation sketch. And here, where sightlines cross from the pomegranate grove. Connolly leaned in, eyes scanning the contour lines. How sure are you? Sure enough to put my position here. I answered, circling a tight bluff with 1,200-meter visibility and natural concealment. It's high angle. Wind drifts a factor. But I've made tougher shots. Nobody challenged me. Captain Marlowe spoke next. We'll route Alpha Squad on a staggered arc, cover the blind zones with drone surveillance, and assign Morgan primary overwatch. Holbrook just nodded. No debate. No sideways glances. Not this time. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the pale morning light, blinking against the sharp air. I should have felt proud, vindicated. Instead, I felt tired, because being right in this line of work usually meant someone almost died. Still, there was something else now. A shift. A weight I didn't carry alone. Later that day, Marlowe caught up with me behind the mess tent. Command's recommending your elevation to sniper team leader, she said, arms folded. It'll put you in front of every pre-op planning cycle from now on. I raised an eyebrow. Thought that wasn't protocol. Marlowe gave a dry smile. Protocol never bled for a platoon. You did. I nodded once. That was all I needed. I wasn't here to climb ladders. I was here to make sure no one else got written off the way I had. The rifle would always be mine. But now my voice was too. Operation Railhook launched just after midnight. Cold, silent, no moon. Alpha and Bravo squads moved through Sector Delta under cover of darkness, while I was posted high on the stoneback shelf, 1,180 meters above the tree line, eyes locked down range through my scope. My spotter, Lance Corporal Devon Hale, was positioned 10 feet left of me, scanning the thermal feed. The early stages were clean. No contact. No chatter. Just the hush of boots on earth and the occasional click of secure radio traffic. But quiet never lasts. At 0304 hours, Bravo's second team, led by Sergeant Cal Dawson, hit resistance near the northern dry well. Small arms fire. Then RPGs. Then the radio cut out. Hale turned to me, eyes wide. They're cut off. Which direction? He pointed. Grid Sierra 3. It's the trench line we mapped, but ruled low probability. I cursed under my breath. That's a fallback route. They're circling. It's not a weak point. It's a damn kill funnel. I swung the scope hard left, adjusting elevation. The terrain was broken and tight. Visibility through the tree cluster was nearly zero. No drone cover. No eyes except mine. I scanned, fast but methodical, praying for heat signatures. There. 3 bodies huddled in partial cover, one firing, one dragging the third, Dawson. I saw the blood on his leg, even through thermal. They were pinned and trying to push west, but the enemy was coming in from above. Too fast. Too many. I didn't wait for orders. First shot dropped a runner at 945 meters. Second took out a machine gunner setting up behind a fallen log. Then the wind changed. My next round drifted half a foot right. Missed clean. Damn it. I adjusted, recalibrated, rolled left on my elbow to get a better angle, just as Hale's voice cracked in my headset. They're retreating blind. No cover. If they push south, they're dead. I didn't think. I moved. I grabbed the radio. This is Raven 1. Engaging secondary. Shift Dawson's team to Echo Slope. I'll cover. Negative, came the reply from command. Echo Slope isn't cleared. I keyed the mic again, steady as hell. They won't make it 10 more meters without suppression. I'm moving. Hale gave me a look, half fear, half admiration. You're leaving position? I'm not leaving, I said, already packing the Barrett. I'm shifting the battlefield. We sprinted low and fast across 80 meters of broken ridge to a tighter firing shelf. It gave me a sliver of view into the lower trench. Wind still hostile, but the angle was mine. I chambered one round, adjusted for drift, and whispered to myself, "You've done worse and worse." The next 3 shots hit clean. The fourth, the hardest, threaded through 2 moving targets with barely a second of lead time. Dawson's team broke clear. Raven 1, this is Bravo, the radio gasped. You just bought us our lives. I exhaled, finally letting my cheek fall from the scope. Hale just muttered, "Holy hell." But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because tomorrow, another team would walk into another sector. And I'd be up here again. Watching. Waiting. Holding lives on the tip of a trigger. The ride back was silent. Even Hale, who usually cracked jokes to cut the tension, said nothing. He just sat across from me in the transport, eyes fixed on the floor, every now and then glancing up like he was waiting for something. Me? I was already drafting the report in my head. I'd shifted from a cleared position. Engaged targets outside designated zones. Used radio channels reserved for emergencies. All of it justified, but none of it sanctioned. Command doesn't always like being reminded that instinct can trump hierarchy. By the time we pulled into COP Vance, the sky was brushing gold. The sun had that low, harsh burn that only Afghanistan could deliver, hot and distant, like everything else out here. I barely made it 10 steps before an MP handed me a note. Call, Holbrook. Tent 1A. Immediate. Here we go. The inside of Tent 1A smelled like coffee that had been burned twice and reheated 3 times. Holbrook stood behind a folding desk. Captain Marlowe was already seated. Connolly, too. Holbrook didn't yell, didn't throw rank around. He just held up my mission log and said, "Explain." I did. Clear. Concise. No drama. No excuses. When I finished, he nodded once, tight-lipped. You disobeyed Overwatch placement protocol. You moved without authorization. You left a fixed position during active engagement. Yes, sir. He paused, glanced at Marlowe, then Connolly. Finally, he asked, was it worth it? I didn't hesitate. Every round. Every step. He nodded again, but this time slower. You made the right call, he said. But right doesn't always mean clean. There's going to be a formal review. Not disciplinary. Just procedure. Marlowe spoke next. You'll write your report. So will I. But I've already submitted a recommendation, Overwatch Doctrine Update. Adjusting for discretionary repositioning when real-time data changes the fight. Connolly added, And I'll back that with my statement. You didn't save just Bravo's flank. You shifted the battle's entire outcome. That surprised me. I wasn't used to being defended, especially not from officers who'd once barely said my name. Holbrook set the file down. Raven, 1, he said, using my call sign like it meant something. You won't always get recognition. And the system will push back. But you keep doing what you did out there, you'll change it from the inside. Outside the tent, I saw them, Dawson's team. Limps, bandages, bruises, alive. They didn't salute me, didn't cheer. They just nodded as I passed. And I knew. That was the kind of report I cared about. 2 days later, word spread fast. Brigadier General Ashton Dunley was on base. A name I hadn't heard in years, but one that had shaped a lot of my early career without ever meeting me face to face. He was old school. Believed snipers were tools, not tacticians. Believed Overwatch meant stay still, shoot when told, and don't speak up. He also believed combat leadership was best left to the core of command. Translation, people who looked like him. At 0900, I got the call. Report to the HQ tent. General Dunley requests your presence. I figured I was walking into a reprimand. Maybe a sideways thank you wrapped in policy lectures. Instead, I walked into a tent half filled with charts, digital feeds, and a row of comms officers trying to pretend they weren't eavesdropping. Dunley stood at the center. White hair, tired eyes. He looked up as I entered and motioned to a map spread across the table. Staff Sergeant Rhea Morgan, he said. You were posted on Stoneback Shelf during Railhook. Yes, sir. He didn't make me sit. Just stared at the map for a long beat, then asked, why did you reposition? I gave the same answer I'd given Holbrook. The terrain lied. Enemy maneuvered faster than projected. Bravo was exposed. The only viable angle for suppression was Echo Slope. He nodded once. Still not looking at me. You disobeyed placement protocol. Yes, sir. Your judgment call saved 5 Marines. Yes, sir. Then he finally turned. Do you know how many sniper complaints I've reviewed over the last 10 years? I said nothing. I knew this was rhetorical. Most are noise, missed opportunities, complaints about authority, placement, visibility. Your names come up a few times, always with the same tone, quiet, persistent, disruptive. I kept my eyes locked on his. He stepped closer, dropped his voice. And yet, every mission where you were allowed to call your own shot, your unit came back with fewer body bags. He looked down, tapped the edge of the table. I used to think tactical instinct belonged to officers. That snipers just pulled triggers. But then I watched the Ridgefoot drone feed from last month. And again at Railhook. And again at Marja Sector 4. He stepped back. You're not disruptive. You're ahead. I blinked. That was not what I expected. He leaned in, more quietly now. You'll receive a commendation. Not because of the shots, but because of the judgment behind them. That's rarer than any confirmed kill. I saluted. He returned it. Then he said something no report would ever include, but I'll never forget. Keep being quiet, Morgan, but don't ever let them silence you. 2 weeks later, I was back on the range. But not to qualify, not to train. This time, I stood behind the scope, not pressed against it. Across the firing line were 6 Marines, sprawled prone in the Afghan dust, scopes flicking between steel targets, each waiting for the order to fire. Range, 900 meters, I called out. Wind east, 3 knots. Mirage is light. Make your adjustments. One of them, PFC Avery, sighed like I'd just asked her to recite poetry under gunfire. Ma'am, I still can't get grouping past 700, she muttered. I knelt beside her, not to correct, but to share. When you breathe, don't just control it. Match it to the wind. You're not fighting the rifle. You're dancing with it. She looked at me, puzzled. But then she slowed her breathing, realigned her reticle, and fired. The round hit dead center on steel. The other Marines turned. I gave no applause, just a nod. Back in the old days, I never saw women at this line. Never saw snipers with ponytails or soft voices or eyes that looked unsure until they looked through a scope. Now, there were 3 in this group, and one of them, Corporal Malley, had already outshot her squad leader in last week's qualifying. I wasn't here to change policy. I was here to remind them what the rifle teaches best. Silence is strength when it's earned, not imposed. When the session ended, they gathered around for questions. Not about the rifle, but about the stories. Is it true you made a 1,420-meter shot in crosswind? Did you really move positions without orders? Were you scared when they cut your comms feed during Marja? I answered what I could. But when one asked, when did they finally respect you? I paused. Still waiting on a few. I said, smiling. But you don't need their respect to save their lives. And if you do it long enough, they'll come around. After they left, I stayed behind, sitting alone at the edge of the range. Not to reflect, just to rest. The war wasn't over. Not globally, not personally, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't just the one behind the rifle anymore. I was the one shaping who picked it up next. The call came at 0200. Emergency overwatch needed on a joint patrol pinned near the Arash foothills, less than 5 clicks from where I'd fired my first live combat shot years ago. Holbrook's voice on the radio was calm but urgent. Raven, 1, we've got friendlies trapped in a dead zone. Fog rolled in, drones are blind. They need eyes and steel. I'm on it, I said, already sliding into my gear. Within 20 minutes, I was back in the mountains. Not alone this time. Hill was on my left. And Mally, yes, that same corporal from the range, on my right. We moved quiet through the low mist, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred distance. By 03:15, we reached an overlook barely wide enough for 3 prone shooters. The situation below was bad. 5 Marines holed up against a crumbling rock shelf. Taliban fighters were pushing from 3 angles. Visibility was garbage. Comms were down. All we had was line of sight, and that was fading fast. Mally's breath caught. They don't have 10 minutes. No, I said, steadying my scope. But we do. And so we fired. 3 rifles. 1 voice. I called shots, ranged targets, adjusted for the fog. Mally hit her first moving target at 970 meters. Hale dropped 2 flankers with clean pairs. I took the left side. Made shots I'll never remember in conditions I'll never forget. It lasted 27 minutes. When the dust settled, when the last shot echoed off the canyon, I keyed the mic, Bravo team, window open. Move now. They did. No casualties. No retreat. And in the end, no headlines. Just silence again. The kind I liked. Back at base, Hale clapped my shoulder. Didn't even break a sweat, did you? I grinned. Just enough to keep the rifle honest. Mally lingered behind. Why do you always call it the rifle, not my rifle? I thought about it. It's not mine. It never was. It belongs to whoever needs it next. She nodded, and I could see it in her eyes, understanding. Not because she'd heard my story, but because now, she was part of it. Later that night, I opened my notebook. The pages where I kept the names, the faces, the missions. I added 5 more. 5 who got to go home. And then I closed it. Not because the story was over, but because I was finally okay with it being heard. Not shouted. Not explained. Just told. Quietly. Like a sniper's promise. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.